Okay, let's dive in. Imagine this. The 1960s, Cambodia's per capita income is right up there with Thailand's, sometimes even a little bit ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to picture now, isn't it?
Exactly. And Phnom Penh, its capital, was called the Pearl of Asia. Beautiful French architecture, development kind of on par with other big Southeast Asian cities.
Really vibrant place back then.
So the big question is, how did a nation with that nickname end up so, well, different today?
It's a fascinating puzzle. And what really jumps out is how everything is connected. You know, the internal politics, the regional wars, all these outside influences.
They all just weave together over the last century or so.
Precisely. And we're going to try and trace that path for you, starting right from the beginning with the French. Because understanding that complexity, there are some profound lessons in there.
It's such a stark contrast now. Cambodia is, significantly less developed than Thailand.
Night and day, really.
People earning maybe 3, 4 times less. You hear things like it being labeled a scammer capital, issues with cultural decline. It's a dramatic shift.
A huge divergence. And to get why, you really have to go back to how the French arrived. It wasn't your typical, invasion story.
Right, that's the surprising part. It wasn't a forceful takeover, was it? Cambodia actually sought them out.
They did. Back in the 1860s, the Cambodian king, he actually reached out, asked for French protection.
Why? What were they afraid of?
Mostly their neighbors. They were really worried about the growing power of Siam, Thailand, as we know it now, and Vietnam, too.
So France steps in as a protector.
And what's striking, especially compared to how they treated Vietnam, is that the French were relatively, well, kinder to Cambodia. That's maybe one way to put it.
Kinder, how?
Well, for one, they let the monarchy stay. They didn't just dismantle the traditional power structure completely.
Okay.
And they invested quite a bit in Phnom Penh's infrastructure, laid the groundwork for that Pearl of Asia reputation. They even helped dig up and restore ancient Khmer temples like Angkor Wat.
So some actual development happened under the French.
Definitely. But, this kind of benevolent foreign help, it does set a precedent, doesn't it? It subtly shapes things down the line, maybe making the country more susceptible to later interventions.
That makes sense. Fast forward past World War II, Japan occupied Cambodia for a bit, right?
Yes, during the war. Afterwards, it went back to French control, but only briefly.
Because the whole world was changing then. Independence movements everywhere.
Exactly. And France had its own problems back home.
Yeah.
So by 1946, they grant Cambodia self-governance. It was sort of a step towards full independence, setting up a constitutional monarchy.
And this is where things start to get complicated internally.
Uh-huh. And it really sets the stage for a key figure, King Norodom Sihanouk. You can't talk about modern Cambodia without talking about him.
He's central to this whole story, initially seen as maybe a bit of a French puppet.
That was the perception early on, yeah.
Yeah.
But he ended up playing a massive role in getting Cambodia its full independence later.
And he made this really unusual move in 1955. He abdicated, stepped down as king.
He did. Gave the throne to his father, Norodom Sihanouk.
Why would he do that? Seems counterintuitive.
It was actually a pretty clever political tactic.
Huh?
By stepping down, he wasn't bound by the constraints of being king anymore. He could form his own political party, run in elections, get directly involved in politics.
Ah, so he could wield power more directly.
And it worked. I mean, he's the former king running for office. His party won by a landslide.
So he dominates the political scene for years.
For over a decade, yeah. And then when his father passed away, Sihanouk basically became prime minister and king again, effectively. All the power concentrated in one person.
And you mentioned earlier, Cambodia was doing okay economically then, late 50s, early 60s?
Surprisingly well, yeah. Income per capita often matched Thailand, sometimes even edged it out slightly.
But that much power in one person's hands? That usually breeds resentment somewhere.
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Even with the economic success, this concentration of power started to alienate people, especially the left-wing opposition. They felt shut out.
And this internal tension is happening just as the Vietnam War is heating up next door.
A dangerous mix. Cambodia found itself in an incredibly precarious spot.
Trying to stay neutral, I imagine.
Desperately trying. But neutrality is almost impossible when a major war is raging right on your border.
What made it so hard for Sihanouk? How did his attempt at neutrality backfire?
Well, his version of neutrality was, let's say, controversial.
Yeah.
He allowed North Vietnam to use Cambodian territory.
For supply lines, like the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Exactly. Supply routes, bases to attack South Vietnam from. It was a major strategic advantage for North Vietnam.
Which must have infuriated the Americans.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. was not happy at all. And this brings us to General Lon Nol.
He was part of Sihanouk's government.
Yes, but he was a pro-American. And in 1970, while Sihanouk was actually out of the country, Lon Nol staged a coup,
Overthrew the king.
overthrew the monarchy, declared a republic, and put himself in charge.
Was the U.S. involved in that coup? There are always rumors.
There are always rumors, yeah. Some sources say the U.S. backed it, but honestly, there's no definitive proof. It might have just been an internal power grab that suited U.S. interest.
So, Lon Nol takes power. Was he any better? Did things improve?
Not at all. His rule was a complete disaster.
How so?
Riddled with corruption, totally ineffective. Conditions in the country actually got worse. Public discontent just kept growing.
And what about the U.S. presence?
Well, Lon Nol, being pro-American, allowed the U.S. to set up military bases inside Cambodia. And then came the bombing.
The U.S. bombing campaigns against North Vietnamese targets inside Cambodia.
Yes, and they were incredibly intense. We're talking hundreds of thousands of Cambodian civilians killed or wounded.
Unbelievable collateral damage.
Devastating.
Yeah.
And it just fueled this massive resentment, not only against Lon Nol's government, but also hugely against the United States.
So the situation is just deteriorating rapidly. People are desperate.
Exactly. Sihanouk's government didn't work out. Lon Nol's government is arguably worse. People start looking for alternatives. Any alternative.
And that alternative turned out to be the Khmer Rouge.
The anti-government communist faction, yeah. They'd been around, but this chaos really allowed them to gain traction.
Led by Pol Pot, tell us about him. The common image is this sort of peasant revolutionary, but that's not quite right, is it?
No, not really. It's one of those historical misconceptions. Pol Pot actually came from a relatively well-off family. They owned land, could hire labor, not exactly a poor peasant background.
And he was educated.
He even studied in France for a while. That's apparently where he really solidified his communist beliefs. Then he came back to Cambodia, worked as a teacher, started organizing in rural areas, gathering followers who were fed up.
Okay, so we have Lon Nol in power, Sihanouk in exile, Pol Pot leading the Khmer Rouge, and then something really strange happens in 1970.
It's almost hard to believe. Sihanouk is in exile, ends up in China. Pol Pot also happens to be visiting China around the same time. And reportedly advised by the Chinese leadership, these two form an alliance.
Wait, Sihanouk, the overthrown king, allies with Pol Pot, the communist who fundamentally opposed the monarchy.
Bizarre, isn't it? But the logic, I guess, was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They both wanted Lon Nol out.
So Sihanouk essentially lends his name and legitimacy, what was left of it, to the Khmer Rouge cause.
Which is a huge boost for the Khmer Rouge. Suddenly, they weren't just some radical fringe group. They had the backing, at least nominally, of the former king. It swayed a lot of people.
That's a critical turning point. Talk about unintended consequences.
Absolutely. It highlights how desperate times can lead to these really dangerous alliances, empowering groups with agendas far more extreme than anyone might have initially realized.
And then the U.S. pulls out of Vietnam. What happens next?
That withdrawal weakened Lon Nol's government significantly as U.S. support dried up. The Khmer Rouge gained momentum very quickly after that.
And in April 1975.
They marched into Phnom Penh, took control of the capital. A new, terrifying chapter was beginning.
After all the chaos with Lon Nol, maybe some people initially hoped the Khmer Rouge would bring stability. Or change.
There might have been some initial hope, yeah? Hope for an end to the fighting, maybe some kind of national renewal. But that hope evaporated almost immediately.
What did they do?
They embarked on this radical, almost unimaginable project to completely reset the country. Democratic Kampuchea, they called it.
What was the vision?
Their goal was this bizarre agrarian utopia, a self-sufficient state completely cut off from the outside world that would become the world's #1 rice producer.
How did they plan to achieve that?
By force. First step, empty the cities. Phnom Penh, other urban centers, completely evacuated.
Empty the cities. Where did people go?
Forced into the countryside. Urban dwellers, seen as the corrupt bourgeoisie, the upper and middle classes, were driven out to become farm laborers.
A massive social engineering project?
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
But here's the chilling irony. Despite forcing millions into agricultural labor, Cambodia's rice production actually went down under the Khmer Rouge.
It failed even on its own terms.
Utterly. It's just a stark lesson in what happens when ideology completely ignores reality and human cost. It crippled the country for generations.
And it wasn't just about farming, was it? They dismantled everything modern.
Everything. Schools, hospitals, banks, markets all shut down. Currency was abolished. Free trade, gone.
Yeah.
All decisions, everything had to go through the Khmer Rouge leadership Angkor, they called it.
A total control society.
Total. And then came the purges.
This is the part that's just horrifying. Who did they target?
Anyone connected to the old ways or perceived as an intellectual, it wasn't just political enemies.
Like who?
Doctors, engineers, lawyers, teachers, anyone who spoke French or English. People who wore glasses seen as a sign of intellectualism. Even people with soft hands, suggesting they didn't do manual labor.
Just based on appearances or profession?
Yes, it was an attempt to erase an entire class of people, entire history.
Mm.
And beyond that, they systematically targeted ethnic minorities, Vietnamese, Cham Muslims, Chinese Cambodians.
The scale of the killing is almost incomprehensible.
It truly is. Within just 4 years, roughly 1975 to 1979, estimates are that 1 in 4 Cambodians died.
1 in 4.
That's somewhere between 2 and 3 million people. Killed directly or dying from forced labor, starvation, disease. It's one of the worst mass killings of the 20th century.
And the long-term damage, especially destroying the education system.
Catastrophic. You wipe out anyone with knowledge, skills, education. How does a country even begin to recover from that? It created this massive void.
How did the Khmer Rouge regime finally end?
Ironically, it was intervention from another communist state, Vietnam.
After the Vietnam War ended, Vietnam was looking to expand its influence in the region.
Pretty much, yeah. They saw Cambodia as the next step. Plus, there were border clashes and growing hostility between the Khmer Rouge and Vietnam.
And the Khmer Rouge were weakening internally?
Yes, there were internal divisions, purges within the party. Some key figures actually defected, including a man named Hun Sen.
Hun Sen, the same Hun Sen who would later lead Cambodia for decades.
The very same. He fled to Vietnam and joined forces with the Vietnamese against the Khmer Rouge.
So Vietnam invades.
They did, aided by Cambodian defectors like Hun Sen. And they defeated the Khmer Rouge relatively quickly, driving them from power in early 1979.
But that wasn't the end of the conflict, was it?
No, because then Vietnam effectively occupied Cambodia for the next 10 years.
So one problem replaced by another.
Pretty much. You had continued instability, ongoing civil war between various factions, the Vietnamese-backed government, remnants of the Khmer Rouge hiding out near the Thai border, other non-communist armed groups. It was still a mess.
How did that finally get resolved?
It took international intervention. It wasn't until 1991, brokered by the United Nations, that a peace agreement was signed. The different factions finally agreed to stop fighting, leading to elections and the current system of government.
1991. So if you think about it, Cambodia has only really had about 30 years of relative peace to try and rebuild.
Just 30 years. And think about what they were rebuilding from. Total devastation, infrastructure gone, economy destroyed, the educated population decimated.
And unlike after the French period, there wasn't a major power stepping in to lay new foundations this time.
Not in the same way, no. Plus, the political leadership that came to power after 1991, well, they haven't exactly propelled the country forward in the way many hoped.
Which brings us to today. Still underdeveloped, low incomes.
Yeah, heavily reliant on foreign aid for a long time. Now increasingly reliant on Chinese investment. And this troubling statistic you hear, that maybe up to 60% of the GDP comes from these so-called gray businesses.
Unregulated, often illicit activities.
Exactly. Not a foundation for sustainable development.
So we've traced this incredibly turbulent history from the Pearl of Asia to the killing fields and this long, slow recovery. What does it all mean now?
Well, the numbers don't lie. Cambodia is significantly less developed than its neighbor Thailand. But it makes you wonder, is having a less developed neighbor actually a good thing for Thailand or any country?
That's a provocative question because often we think about competition driving progress, right?
Exactly. If competition pushes innovation, maybe having strong, successful neighbors actually forces everyone to up their game. Think about, say, the EU, or how Japan, Korea, Taiwan pushed each other historically.
So maybe a region where everyone is developing is better for everyone in the long run.
It's something to consider. Does shared progress create a rising tide that lifts all boats? Could long-term stability and prosperity actually be better served when all your neighbors are doing well? It kind of forces you to keep improving, doesn't it? Otherwise, you risk getting left behind.
A lot to think about there. This complex history really offers so many angles.
It really does. What stands out most to you as you hear this story unfold?